My parents spent my entire life using my sister's illness as an excuse to completely ignore me. So when I eventually made something of myself without any help from them, they suddenly reappeared, acting like family mattered and tossing around demands like they were owed something. I wasn't having it. I shut the door on them hard, and now they won't stop crawling back, begging for a second chance. I don't carry around a lot of dark secrets. Actually, scratch that. I've got one. Just one. And it's a heavy one that's stuck with me for years. Buried deep, hidden from my family. I always figured it would come out eventually. Just didn't expect it to explode, literally, during Thanksgiving dinner last year. Buckle up. This story's got some wild turns. I'm 36 now, but growing up, I fit that classic, forgotten child mold almost to a T. Well, that started when I was about 9 years old. It was around 3 in the morning when Aunt Shirley showed up at our front door, waking me up and telling me to quickly pack a bag. Mom had been rushed to the hospital. She was pregnant at the time, and my little sister, Laura, was on her way 2 months early, no less. Those next few weeks? A total whirlwind. We were in and out of hospitals, and every adult conversation was whispered like it was top secret. Laura was born so tiny she barely looked real, like one of those delicate porcelain dolls I used to collect. Except instead of lace and bows, she was hooked up to more wires and tubes than I could count. I remember trying to reach out and touch her hand once, just gently, and my dad smacked mine away without a word. That's when it hit me, this invisible wall had gone up, separating me from them. I could feel it even then. When Laura finally came home, everything changed. Our house went from warm and lived in to something that felt more like a hospital ward. My mom became obsessed with keeping everything spotless. She bleached every surface, installed hand sanitizer stations in every room, and scrubbed everything like our lives depended on it. To this day, the smell of bleach still ties my stomach in knots. Now, maybe that wouldn't have been the worst thing, but it's what came after that really left a mark. The second I even sniffled or cleared my throat, I was shipped off, either to Grandma Kathleen's place or Aunt Shirley's. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was a kid. Grandma always had cookies in the oven, and Aunt Shirley owned a whole shelf full of adventure novels I was slowly working my way through. But after a while, I caught on. I realized I wasn't being sent away for my own good. I was being removed, like I was the threat. Wintertime became a battle. I'd layer up 2, sometimes 3 pairs of leggings, just trying not to catch a cold, desperate to stay in my own home. But no matter how careful I was, all their focus stayed locked on Laura. So I shifted gears. If I couldn't get attention by being needy, I'd earn it. I went all in, straight A's, no attitude, winning every school competition. I even memorized 10 Spanish poems just to show them I could do something impressive. And what did I get for it? One time, after I proudly recited one of those poems, my dad turned to me and said, "Don't speak too close to Laura. If your spit lands on her, she might get sick." Yeah, that was the moment it stopped being just disappointing and started to hurt. But the worst blow came when I was 13. I'd spent months teaching myself how to play bridge over troubled water on the piano, getting ready for the school talent show. The night of the performance, Laura happened to spike a fever. Not a single person from my family came. The auditorium seats I'd saved for them stayed empty. 2 weeks later, Laura played the recorder. Just one short recital, maybe 15 minutes long, and wouldn't you know it, the entire extended family came out of the woodwork. Both sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles, the whole crew. Laura noticed it too. And she learned quick. By the time she was 8, her real health issues were mostly gone, but that didn't stop her from milking it. Headache? Day off school. Tired? I'd get roped into doing her chores. Nervous about a test? Mom would call the school and get the deadline pushed. It was like she had a cheat code for life, and my parents were totally bought in. So I started pulling away. I'd retreat to my room and bury myself in books, mostly ones about antiques and old art styles. That little space became my safe zone. Funny enough, it was because Laura claimed to be allergic to my vanilla-scented air freshener. So she never came in, and I finally had a place of my own. At some point, I stopped minding when I got sent away. In fact, I looked forward to it. Being at Grandma Kathleen's meant someone would actually ask me about school or notice what I was reading. She became more of a mom to me than my own ever was. She's the one who got me hooked on vintage jewelry, something I still love to this day. Back at home, the only time my name came up was when my parents were making excuses. They'd say stuff like, "Laura needs more support because of everything she's been through," or "Edward's just so self-sufficient. She understands Laura's special needs." But no, I didn't understand. I was just a kid trying to figure out why being healthy made me less worthy of love. Still, if there's one good thing that came out of it all, it's that I learned to stand on my own. When no one's checking your homework or clapping when you win something, you figure out how to cheer for yourself. And the thing about being invisible? No one sees your screw-ups or your wins. That freedom? I ran with it. Hard. And in just a few months, I completely flipped the script on my life. My parents didn't see it coming. And as for Laura? Let's just say, her free ride hit a wall. Even now, I still tell people what I did because honestly, I'm proud of it. I'd share the whole story here, but it's too much for one video. When Laura finally came home from the hospital, it was like our house got quarantined. Mom went full germ freak mode. I'm talking military-grade disinfectant on every surface, hand sanitizer bottles stashed in every corner, and a cleaning schedule that could have run a hospital wing. To this day, just catching a whiff of bleach makes my chest tighten. Now, that alone might have been tolerable, but the real damage came with what happened next. The minute I so much as sneezed or looked pale, I got kicked out of the house. No discussion. Off I'd go, either to Grandma Kathleen's or Aunt Shirley's place. At first, my kid brain didn't mind it so much. Grandma made the best chocolate chip cookies, and Aunt Shirley had shelves full of those thick adventure novels I loved. But eventually, it clicked. I wasn't being cared for, I was being exiled. Wintertime became a kind of survival game. I'd bundle up in layers, 3 pairs of leggings under my jeans, just trying not to catch even a cold, hoping to stay under the radar. But no matter how hard I tried, all the love and concern went straight to Laura. So I pivoted. If I couldn't win their sympathy, I'd try earning their respect. I became the textbook perfect kid. Straight A's, clean mouth, science fair champion, you name it. I even memorized and performed 10 different poems in Spanish, hoping they'd notice. And my dad? He told me not to get too close to Laura while reciting them because, your spit might get her sick. That one stung. But the moment that really tore me up inside happened when I was 13. I had poured months into teaching myself to play Bridge Over Troubled Water on our old upright piano, getting ready for the school talent show. On the night of the performance, Laura happened to have a little fever. Surprise, surprise, no one came to see me. I played that song to a room full of strangers. 2 weeks later, Laura gave a 15-minute recorder recital, and you'd think it was Carnegie Hall. Every single relative within a 50-mile radius showed up, both sets of grandparents, aunts, uncles, the works. And Laura? She caught on quick. By the time she hit 8, she'd pretty much outgrown the serious health stuff, but that didn't stop her from putting on a show. Got a headache? She stayed home. Felt tired? Guess who had to do her chores? Nervous about a test? Mom was on the phone with the school getting her more time. The girl knew how to work the system, and she worked it like a pro. Meanwhile, I kept shrinking into myself. My bedroom became my little world, books piled everywhere, mostly about art history and antique treasures. It was the only space I had any control over. Laura claimed she was allergic to my vanilla-scented air freshener, so she never stepped foot inside. Honestly, that fake allergy became my saving grace. Over time, I stopped dreading being sent away. I actually started looking forward to it. Whether I was sick or Laura was, I knew I'd end up with Grandma Kathleen, who would actually listen when I talked and genuinely seemed to care how my day went. She's the one who got me into vintage jewelry. In a lot of ways, she became the mom I never had. Back at home, if my parents even said my name, it was usually some version of, "Laura just needs more attention because of her rough start," or, "Edward's so mature and independent, she gets it." But I didn't get it. I was just a kid trying to understand why being healthy made me invisible. Still, I'll say this. Being overlooked taught me how to stand on my own. When no one's checking your work or clapping when you succeed, you figure out real quick how to motivate yourself. And the best part of being ignored? Nobody notices when you start making bold moves. I took full advantage of that freedom, and believe me, took advantage doesn't even begin to cover it. I flipped my whole life around in a matter of months. My parents didn't see it coming, and Laura? Well, she finally had to deal with some consequences for once. To this day, I still share the story whenever I can, because I'm damn proud of what I pulled off. I signed up for every club I could fit around my part-time job at Murphy's Diner. Stephen, the owner, practically became a stand-in parent. She even remembered my birthday one year, which is more than I can say for my actual parents. Debate team? Yup. National Honor Society president? Check. School newspaper editor? You bet. Debate was where I really found my stride. There's just something incredibly satisfying about calmly tearing apart someone's argument piece by piece while keeping a straight face. It sharpened my thinking and taught me how to negotiate, skills I didn't realize would come in handy later on. I won state. Twice. Not that my parents were there to see it. Laura had some soccer tournament, C-team, mind you, and she wasn't even on the field. Things really started heating up junior year. I sat for the SATs and no joke, I nailed a perfect score. Not just good. Perfect. 1,600. Less than 1% of students ever do that. I remember staring at the screen like I was in some alternate reality, refreshing the page a dozen times, thinking it had to be a glitch. I flew home, practically buzzing, ready to share the news. Silly me. Mom was in the kitchen helping Laura with her English homework. I burst in, holding the score printout like it was gold. "Mom, I got a perfect SAT score." She didn't even look up. "That's great, honey, but can you keep it down? Laura's studying for an important test." Laura piped up too. "Yeah, not all of us are Miss Perfect, okay?" And then Mom, in that sweet tone she saves just for her, goes, "Don't stress, sweetheart. You're just a different kind of learner." I still have the official score report tucked away in a box somewhere. Never once made it to the fridge. But Laura's C+ in English? Front and center, right under a "We're so proud of you" magnet. College applications were a solo mission. I applied to 15 schools without breathing a word to anyone. Wrote every essay myself, collected all the letters of recommendation, even tackled the mountain of financial aid paperwork on my own. Miss Margaret, my guidance counselor, was the real MVP. Since my folks couldn't be bothered with the FAFSA, I stayed after school and handled it myself. Then the letters started coming in. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Northwestern, all with scholarship offers. I kept every acceptance letter locked in a little metal box under my bed. I knew what would happen if Laura found them. Suddenly it would turn into her drama. But if Edward goes to Harvard, I'll be left all alone. Cue the waterworks. The day I got the official full-ride scholarship offer from Northwestern, Cynthia made junior varsity cheerleading. Wanna guess which one of us got a big family dinner out of it? Yeah, wasn't me. They all went to Olive Garden while I ate microwave mac and cheese alone in my bedroom. But honestly, that scholarship was my golden escape hatch. Tuition, room and board, books, the whole package was covered. I was finally going to get out of that house, where my options were either being ignored or treated like an inconvenience. When the acceptance packet arrived, I didn't celebrate with my family. I took it to my favorite corner of the town library, top floor, third window overlooking the park, and just sat there for an hour, quietly crying. Not from sadness. It was pure, overwhelming relief. That night, I brought it up at dinner. Sat down and said, I'm going to Northwestern. And just like clockwork, the responses rolled in. Dad raised an eyebrow and said, Northwestern? That's pretty far. What if Cynthia needs you for something? Mom chimed in with, I hope you're not expecting us to help financially. Cheerleading isn't cheap. Then Cynthia, ever the star of the show, burst into tears and whined, oh my God, finally. Can I have your room? I need more space for my TikTok videos. That summer, I picked up every shift I could at Murphy's Diner. Steven, the owner, became one of the only people in my life who consistently had my back. She slipped me extra tips when she could and always made sure I went home with leftover pie at the end of the night. She also gave me one of the most important lessons I've ever learned. Honey, she told me once while wiping down the counter, in diners and in life, the loudest folks usually got the least worth hearing. Move-in day rolled around, and shocker, my parents couldn't make it. Cynthia had a cheer competition. Again. Aunt Shirley came through instead. She drove me to campus, helped me unpack, and handed me a plain white envelope with $500 tucked inside. Your grandma Kathleen wanted you to have this, she said. She's so proud of you. Later, I found out Grandma had been quietly saving that money from her Social Security checks for months, just so I'd have a little cushion. That woman was pure heart. That first night in my dorm, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to chase validation anymore. I was going to build a life so full, so rich, that being overlooked wouldn't even be possible. Not to get back at my family. Not out of spite. I did it for the 9-year-old girl who used to be sent away just for sneezing. College flew by in a haze of midnight study sessions, dollar store ramen, and that beautiful, almost addictive freedom. I finally had space to breathe and think and grow. I joined the Antiques Appreciation Society, which was basically my dream come true. Hours of deep dives into vintage jewelry, its history, and the craftsmanship behind each piece. I even organized a mini exhibition in our student union, pulling together borrowed pieces from local collectors. No one from my family showed up, of course. But it didn't matter. For once, other people saw the value in what I'd spent years quietly learning. Graduation came, and I walked across the stage summa cum laude. My name was called, and the crowd clapped, but my parents didn't notice. They were busy helping Cynthia transfer, again. Third college in 2 years. Then life threw me a plot twist. I landed an entry-level spot at a high-end auction house in Chicago. I'm not naming names here, but if you know antiques, you'd recognize it, a top-tier operation, the kind of place that handles estate sales for old money families and discreet billionaires. I started off in the estate division, logging inventory from wealthy folks who'd passed away. Not exactly glamorous work, but it paid, and I didn't complain. The first few months were all china sets and ornate furniture, your standard rich people leftovers. But then we got the Westfield estate. Mrs. Donald had passed with no heirs and left behind a mountain of what everyone thought was costume jewelry. That's where everything changed. I was combing through a tray of her stuff when I picked up a brooch that immediately fell off. It wasn't showy, but something about the weight and the clasp told me it wasn't a cheap knockoff. Years of handling my grandma's old pieces had trained my instincts. I skipped lunch that day, holed up in a side office with a stack of reference books and access to the company's jewelry databases. Every detail I found made me more sure. This thing wasn't fake. It was something real. But I was the new girl. No one was going to take my word for it. So I pulled a move straight out of my debate team playbook. I built my argument. For the next 2 weeks, I used my lunch breaks and evenings to study Art Deco jewelry and learn how to authenticate vintage pieces. I even paid out of pocket for a beginner gemology course, money I really didn't have. Finally, I worked up the nerve to go to my boss, Mr. Anthony. I brought binders of images, historical references, and everything else I could pull together. Sir, I said, I think we might have overlooked something big in the Westfield batch. Without even glancing up from his phone, he muttered, Edward, those are costume pieces. We've already logged them. Right, I said, but take a look at these makers' marks. They match Cartier's 1925 signature line. That got his attention. He stared at me for a moment and asked, "Where'd you learn all this?" I just shrugged and said, "I did some homework." Long story short, that costume brooch sold at auction for $42,000. It was part of a limited Cartier collection made for a European duchess back in the 20s. After that, Parker started taking me seriously. He started sending more pieces my way, asking for my input. Suddenly, that so-called weird hobby of mine, sifting through vintage jewelry, was actually useful. I went all in. Every weekend was spent at estate sales or online classes. My apartment slowly morphed into a jewelry archive, notes, charts, Hallmark guides taped to the walls. I even started keeping a detailed notebook documenting how to spot fakes and confirm provenance. And the more I learned, the more value I brought to the auction house. I was finding rare items others missed, building relationships with collectors, and keeping the sales department on its toes. My commissions started growing. My savings account finally started to look alive. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just scraping by, I was building something that was mine. My family? Still astonishingly uninterested. Every Sunday dinner, yep, I still went back then. Like some kind of loyal idiot, the conversations would go something like this. "Mom, Edward's still at that antique store, right?" Me, "It's an auction house." And actually, I just authenticated a rare Tiffany piece last week. Cynthia, cutting in without missing a beat. "Oh my God, speaking of jewelry. You have to see this charm bracelet I found at the mall. So cute." But by that point, I'd stopped caring. Because finally, I had something that belonged to me. Something I was actually good at. Something that had nothing to do with being Cynthia's older sister or the family's forgotten kid. Then came the Harrington collection. This was 2 years into my time at the auction house. Big estate. Old money family. The kind of project people in the industry whispered about like it was sacred ground. I was assigned to help catalog the jewelry, and tucked in among the usual high society sparkle was this quiet little Art Nouveau piece. Most folks brushed right past it. Not me. I spent 3 straight days digging into it. Barely slept. Something about it felt off, in a good way. Turned out, it wasn't just a nice little brooch. It was from a famous French jeweler's private wartime collection. Thought to be lost since World War II. That ordinary piece sold for $218,000 at auction. Next thing I know, Parker, the same boss who used to half listen to me, calls me into his office. I'm thinking, finally, a promotion. Instead, he says something that shifts my whole world. "Edward," he goes, "you're wasting your talent here. You should be running your own authentication business." I laughed at first. Start a business? With what? Monopoly money. But the idea stuck. It didn't let go. I started doing small freelance gigs on the side, quietly. Word started to get around that I had an eye. Private collectors began contacting me directly, asking for help evaluating estate pieces. One night, I was sitting in my tiny apartment, surrounded by stacks of jewelry guides, loupe in one hand, notes all over the floor, and it just clicked. I could actually do this. I could build something real. Something that was mine. So I did what any totally sane person would do. I took out a fat loan against my beat-up car, drained every penny from my savings, and signed a lease on a closet-sized office in a questionable part of town. It was basically a storage room above a Chinese restaurant. Smelled like Kung Pao chicken 24/7, and the Wi-Fi only worked if you sat pressed against the far wall. But it was mine. The first few months? Brutal. I'd wake up before dawn with a pit in my stomach, calculating how long I could keep the lights on. The loan payments loomed over me like storm clouds. My office furniture consisted of a wobbly sea table from Goodwill and a desk chair I found on the curb. Yes, I cleaned it. Thoroughly. But in the jewelry world, connections are everything. And my time at the auction house had built me a solid Rolodex. I started small, authentication work for local antique shops and estate dealers. My rates were modest, but my attention to detail started getting noticed. Slowly, word of mouth did its thing. Then, 6 months in, the big break came. A dealer I'd worked with at the auction house reached out. He needed someone to evaluate a family's Victorian brooch collection before they tried to sell it. I took it on. What they thought were just old trinkets turned out to include two incredibly rare pieces, misidentified as later reproductions. I documented everything. Took 2 weeks. Barely slept. Cross-checked every detail.